much happiness to everything as love goes glory.
For many years, Norman and Dorothy Spears have been the backbone of the Scottish Association of Moviemakers. Now, however, we're going to put them at the other end of the camera lens and ask them to tell us about a few special moments in their lives together. And in accordance with tradition, it's ladies first.
I first met Norman when I was working in the post office. I was a student at Edinburgh University, and they employed people at Christmas to do extra work. And I was put on sorting parcels, which meant chucking things out of a trolley into various bags. And they employed young men to carry these bags to the next stage. And one of those was Norman. And every evening at 9 o'clock we had a break of half an hour, and we sat talking, himself and his friend. The others I was working with were ladies who were making money for Christmas. Anyway, after weeks, we then came to Christmas, and you paid off. Now, this was during the war, and everything was blackout. And blackout, I stood on the tramway island outside Woolworths on Princess Street, in the middle of Princess Street, waiting for my tram home. And I saw 2 bikes disappearing into the darkness, and I thought, I may never see him again. But I made sure I would. And I discovered that Thursdays they had training. And I discovered he went to the National Library in George IV Bridge. So I suddenly found I was interested in books. And I frequented the library and just happened to meet him. And that's when it started. It got serious. I then invited him by letter to attend a dance. My mother was raising money for charity of some kind, and he came to the dance. And he still has that letter, I believe, that I wrote perfectly. In fact, I did a rough copy, and then I did a perfectly written copy, so that it was just perfect. And that's how it started. As you can imagine, I didn't want this ever to end. And it didn't end. It was wartime. Norman eventually graduated and went into the army. And I went into the ATS to do some job connected with Bletchley, but on Japanese intelligence. And I was going out to India, and his mum and dad by this time lived in London. And as I was stationed in London, I could visit them. And Norman was down, and I was going to set off for India. And he said to me, as he took me to the station, "You will come back to me, won't you?" And I said, "Yes, I will." And I did. And then we ultimately married in 1948 and waited a long time before we had a baby. Sadly, our first baby was stillborn. That was a great upset at the time. And then eventually Wendy arrived. And Wendy is now married, and we have 2 gorgeous grandsons, very handsome young men. We don't see them. One lives in London and the other is at present in Belfast. And Wendy and Ken are in London. So the family are small but very precious. And we are so lucky that we ever met in that post office in Edinburgh.
Well, in 1942, I think it was, I was a student. And as was the custom in those days, you tried to get a job at Christmas with the post office because they were looking for extra staff to help with the Christmas rush. And I remember signing on at the post office and being offered a shift. I think it was something like 2 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night. I said, that seems all right to me. And I signed on and turned up. And there were 2 of us put on to duties of shifting the bags of mail from one sorting office to another part. And there were about half a dozen girls sorting out the actual mail. They were tossing the parcels into the various bags. And when they were full, this other guy and myself would load up the sacks, put them into a big trolley thing, and we'd wheel them off to some other part of the building. Now, there was obviously something interesting, because we always went back to that same group for our break. We had a quarter of an hour or so break at some point in the evening, afternoon or evening. And I saw this girl, and I knew that she was Dorothy. And eventually I discovered that she'd lived somewhere in Fairmar Head or somewhere like that. And I do recall there was a time when the supervisor was not around. And I knew that in the supervisor's desk there was a list of the temporary staff. So I remember sneaking up to look at the desk. There were half a dozen names there. Dorothy, Fairmont Avenue, Fairmar Head, Dorothy Glen. Freya, must remember that. Now, obviously at that time, even though it was only a few weeks having met her, I must have had some connection. There must have been something clicked. Why would I have gone up to look at the desk to find out her name in full and address? So I thought, that's interesting. I must remember that. However, at the end of the time, my term of duty finished probably Christmas Eve, and this other guy, he was a Stewart's boy, Stewart's Melville School, and we cycled off home again. I began to wonder if I'll ever see her again. Didn't really think any more about it, but it was nice not having known her for that couple of weeks. Sometime later, I was going into the library. Here's Dora. That's the girl who was in the post office. So we got chatting, and I think she probably spent a short time chatting away. I didn't know at that time that she wasn't just happened to be walking past the library. She told me years later that she had planned to be at the library on Wednesday afternoon, because she knew I always went to the library on Wednesday. However, it was worth it. It was worth it in the end.
And more than 60 years later, they are still smiling together.
I only hope that fate may bring love story to you. Love is the sweetest thing